Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. If you're, my age or older, you remember Jimmy Carter, and God bless you. The first election I voted in was 1980 for Ronald Reagan over Jimmy Carter. I was 18 years old. But, until millions of other people throughout history in the United States, you start turning 14 or 15, you start looking for jobs. And I found it easier to get a job when I was like 13 or 14, working for a pizza joint, handing out flyers door to door, than the entire 4 years of the Carter administration. Those were tough times. You would think the name Carter would have left a pretty bad taste in the mouth of even Georgians, where Jimmy Carter came from. But alas, he still has a strong network. And now he has a grandson who's running for that state's highest office. USDailyReview.com has written an editorial about that candidate, Jason Carter. It's a fascinating piece. It should have been entitled "Come a Chameleon," because that appears to be what Jason Carter is. A gentleman who have contributed to that article, Ryan Matthew Mahoney. He is a guest here on our program today. Ryan, welcome to The Price of Business.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet. I do want to encourage the listener to go to USDailyReview.com this morning. Check out the featured articles in the politics section. You'll see that that article plays a prominent view there. Ryan, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're with a company called Parlay Political. Tell us about that.
Sure. So Parlay Political, we're a Georgia-based consulting firm. And for those who haven't really paid attention in Georgia this year, we've had an onslaught of elections. Our United States Senator, Saxby Chambliss, has retired, and so there was a big race for the Republican nomination. Several congressmen are fighting for that. And actually, it's an outsider, David Perdue, that won the Republican nomination.
And he's a pretty solid Tea Party guy, isn't he?
He's not. He's really kind of that. He's the former CEO of Reebok and Dollar General.
Oh, okay. He's a corporate
guy. He's really kind of a pro-business, pro-growth guy that came in and actually defeated several sitting congressmen and big-name conservatives. And so that's kind of an interesting race. But like you said, the other race that's on the top of the ticket is to Jimmy Carter's grandson, Jason, is trying to carry the family name to beat Republican Governor Nathan Deal. So it's been a really interesting year and a half in Georgia, and my role in working with the Georgia Republican Party is to make sure that both David Perdue and Governor Deal are elected come November 4th. But you brought up a really interesting point in that Jason Carter has to really gravitate towards his grandfather's network to raise the money to be able to distance himself from his grandfather. So it's kind of an interesting catch-22, but he's definitely been able to raise the money, and now it'll be interesting to see if he can rid himself of the Carter name in enough time to get elected.
What's interesting is that, I guess it was enough to get him the nomination, but will it be enough to get him through November? But it's interesting because it's like Georgia's having a series. It's kind of like having a revival of 1970s sitcoms, isn't it? You got Michelle Nunn running for U.S. Senate, apparently getting the nod there, and then you got Jason Carter getting the nod there. It's like it's not necessarily the best sitcoms either.
Right, exactly. One political observer called it the Downton Abbey Democrats, and I only know about Downton Abbey because of my wife, but you've got Jason Carter and Michelle Nunn both hoping that titles are going to be passed down from generation to generation, and unfortunately I don't think that's the case. But neither of them had real competition in their primaries. They've basically been able to jet set for the last year or so and collect as much money as possible. But at the end of the day, the Republican leadership has really done a great job in Georgia, especially weathering the Great Recession, and so it's an uphill battle for both Nunn and Carter.
Yeah, Michelle Nunn being the daughter of Sam Nunn.
That's right. And obviously a little bit different. Sam Nunn's reputation in the Senate was a little bit different than Jimmy Carter's reputation.
Oh, yeah. Sam Nunn at least seemed reasonable, which I don't know.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter seemed like a buffoon, frankly. He
That's right.
was
but
such an incredible...
That, I think they're both running out of the same playbook. I mean, Georgia is still a solid conservative state, from top to bottom. Our statewide elected officials are all Republicans. Our 2 United States senators, our delegation is a majority Republican. So they're basically playing this game where they raise money and they try to be as middle of the road as possible, which, in my opinion, means not really answering questions, just kind of spitting off rhetoric. And their hope is they'll be able to buy enough TV time to trick voters, and then on Election Day, or I guess the day after, voters will say, oh, my gosh, who did we just elect? And they'll realize it's 2 folks that want to continue the Obama agenda right here in Georgia.
So tell me a little bit about about the polling for Jason Carter. And by the way, he's just a state senator. And has he served very long in the Senate?
No, he hasn't. He's just had a couple of terms, and what's really interesting is his district is the most liberal district in Georgia, but yet he wants to represent our conservative values. So it's an interesting needle to thread for him. But the polls are kind of all over the place. I mean, there's so many outside groups that are weighing in, but the most recent poll shows the governor and Jason Carter within a few percentage points of each other, and then the most recent poll in that Senate race has David Perdue up 9. So I think it's still too early to see what kind of victory the governor is going to be able to secure. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of money spent both by the campaigns and by outside groups. But you can't change the value system that we have right now in Georgia. National media wants to come in and say that, the demographics are shifting and we're going purple. But you travel around and you see that people are still solid Republicans and they appreciate what the governor's done. I mean, 250,000 new private sector jobs since he took office. We still have a AAA bond rating, which is hard to come by these days for a state. Lowest unemployment in 7 years. So, he has a great legacy to tout when he's out on the campaign trail. And Jason Carter just, can swing away and bash the governor, but there's no substance there.
Yeah, absolutely. So who is Jason Carter? He seems difficult to nail down. Very similar to his grandfather, whom a lot of people thought they were electing a conservative. The pro-life movement and the social conservatives came out in full force in 1976 to help this outsider, and then he turned out to be this hardcore lefty ideologue. One of the most hardcore ideologues we've had in decades. Barack Obama being maybe the only one who's even more hardcore, in recent years.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that's the big question that, insiders and outsiders are trying to figure out. Who's Jason Carter? Well, it kind of depends what day it is. I mean, just when you think you have him nailed down, he flops on an issue or he goes completely silent. Some of the things that we do know about him is that, he supports Obamacare. He supports the Medicaid expansion in Georgia. He supports bigger government, higher taxes. He obviously kind of goes with some of those middle-of-the-road topics like education. He thinks that the governor needs to add another $1 billion to education, but fails to tell us how that's going to happen. We've run the numbers, and you'll need to completely cut out about 20 different state departments to be able to find another $1 billion without raising taxes. When asked if he's willing to raise taxes, he said no, ... right now. So he doesn't want to raise taxes while he's on the campaign trail, but if you elect him, it looks like that's something that's a top priority. So who's Jason Carter? I can tell you that he's a left-wing liberal, just like his grandfather. On the campaign trail, he's hoping folks will think he's some post-partisan, leader, but at the end of the day, he is anything but that.
Wow, that's interesting. Interesting. Great conversation. Thanks so much for your time. I want to encourage the listener to go check out usdailyreview.com. It's one of our featured articles today is who is Jason Carter. You would think, there would be some more kumbaya in the national media. Wouldn't you have thought that more national media would have been talking about this fact that the grandson is rising, or do you think that could actually make things harder for the grandson and the media is just quietly ignoring him to do him a favor? What do you think?
Well, I think this the Senate race is a little bit more sexy since the control of the Senate's kind of weighing in the balance up here. But the New York Times did a really interesting piece about 2 weeks ago on this race, and basically pointed out what I led with is that Carter is using his grandfather for fundraising, but they have this awkward relationship outside of the fundraising world because Carter doesn't want to be associated with him. So some of the outside media have kind of weighed in and tried to figure it out. And to date, that's the best that they can come up with.
Thanks so much. Again, Ryan Matthew Mahoney. He's with Parlay Political, and that's parlaypoliticalllc.com to check out his site, P-A-R-L-A-Y, parlaypoliticalllc.com. Ryan, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Kevin.
When we come back, much more for you. I am Kevin Price, and this is The Price of Business.